Hello and welcome to the Trail Network podcast. I'm this week's host, Leah Yingling, and I am thrilled to be joined by co-host and this week's guest, Rachel Drake, our recent first place finisher at the JFK 50 miler and the new course record holder. We are going to talk all about the JFK 50 miler this week. And Rachel, I'm so excited to get to chat with you.
Thanks, Leah. I'm super excited to hash this out. I feel like you're the ultimate student of the sport, so I'm really excited to hear about your perspective, commentating as well.
Yeah, it was definitely a journey. I think you could say that about any of these live streams that I've participated in now. It's a labor of love.
I and like the work that you must do ahead of time too, because I was watching some of the live stream and you knew all these facts about where people were from and what their mileage was and their previous race results.
Yeah, and I think for what it's worth, it's been really nice to have a front seat to your training because you were the highlight a lot of the live stream because you led the race wire to wire. And I was very proud to be able to speak to the small snippets of workouts, the couple of seconds I was able to share with you on intervals, and speak to truly what I saw firsthand over the last couple of months as you were throwing down some seriously hard training for JFK despite everything that life was throwing your way. So I know I tell you often, but again, live for our listeners, I'm impressed by you. I know everybody listening out there is impressed by you, and you're just a true Renaissance woman.
Thanks, Leah. That means a ton coming from you. I really feel the same about you and all the things you juggle. So it's nice to have these awesome women in our lives. And I was hiking with some of our mutual friends this afternoon, Morgan Olson and Franny Murray, and we were just talking about because they were watching the live stream as well, and they were just talking about how awesome it was that nobody really knew watching the live stream if they didn't know that we were really good friends because you were just so professional about it.
I tried really hard.
As I was watching it, I was like, not once has she said Rachel's my best friend.
Yeah, I
You know,
know.
it's like I mean, you were just like so professional.
It's a really tough line to balance, I think, with these live streams. The further I get into the sport involvement, the more friends I make, and the more difficult it makes each and every one of these live streams. I think when I saw Matt Seidel cross the finish line, I commented on the live stream, I was like, oh, I'm pretty biased. He was my Western States pacer. I'm so happy for him right now.
That's awesome. That's so awesome. Yeah, you had fun snippets about him too, just like I think not I mean, not many people are gonna know that he's the world record holder for fastest marathon run in a banana suit. So, like, I was just yeah, that was really cool. All the things
Yeah.
that you knew about all the athletes.
Yeah, it's fun. And I will say props to Mountain Outpost. This was the first year that JFK had a live stream. And from my experience from all the live streams I've participated in now, JFK deserves a live stream. It's the
Mm,
perfect course for one.
mhm.
Like, aside from the fact that you can't get drone footage on the Appalachian Trail in the beginning, like our ability to have bike cams on the lead runners was just amazing. Our ability to have drone footage on you in that last 8 miles out when you're on the rolling country roads was just awesome to view and speak about. And I just thought this was one of the better
Mm.
live streams that I've participated in. And I think it gave a lot of people insight into JFK who have never experienced it before. And I don't know if this is a hot take or not, but I don't know if JFK has ever been gone, but I think JFK is back. And I think we're going
Mm.
to start to see this race become more of a season ender and season closer for a lot of
Yeah.
people. Like, we lost North Face 50 miler a few years back as that like November race that people were kind of throwing down at to close their seasons. And people these days have kind of been like, maybe Javelina, maybe
Mhm.
UTCT. And I think we're going to start to see a lot more people come to JFK. And I think you and David Sinclair and the people that lined up at this year's past race, making it a historic race on both the men and women's front, are going to be part of the reason we're going to see a push for JFK in the future years, because you guys all raised the bar. And we'll get to talk about that in a little bit, but it was just really cool to see.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I feel like, you know, we would get really, you know, star athletes like Jim Walmsley doing it many years back, and Hayden Hawks and Ellie Greenwood, obviously Sarah Beal, but it's not like a perennial race that gets multiple, you know, heavy hitters. And I hope that with the live stream and with the records going down, like I hope a lot of other women are just licking their chops right now. Like Tyler and I were talking about like, all right, who's gonna lower it? Like it's super exciting to think about, you know, people shaving even more time off there.
Yeah, before we dive into your race day, I was actually thinking about that same question. And I think I have a person in mind that I think wants to, like, would likely want to do JFK after this weekend happened. Who do you think from the women's side or men's side too, but women's side in particular, would be a great candidate for throwing down at JFK?
I don't know if this person like necessarily wants to, but I'm just like on a MK Sullivan kick right now with her. I know that she's a good trail runner, and obviously, you know, she just ran a 2:36 marathon at New York, which is not the fastest marathon course. So I
Hmm.
feel like she's got the skill set to do something special there. Um, who else were
Definitely.
we were talking about Erin Clark too.
Oh,
Like if she
yeah.
could get healthy, I feel like she would be a really, really good uh scary person to go
That's so
after it as
good.
well.
I'd
Who are you
actually,
thinking?
I was thinking Danny Moreno.
Oh,
And I
heck
think
yeah, Danny came up too, for
part of
sure.
that was like I saw her just having so much hype over like your race and Eli's race this weekend and David's race as well. And she's someone that has dabbled a lot in the 50K distance, and then just announced,
Mhm.
I think last week, that she's going after a golden ticket this spring at Canyons.
Oh, I
So,
didn't see that. Oh, that
yeah.
is awesome.
So
Cool.
part of me wishes like her foray into the 50-mile 100K distance would be something like JFK, but I know
Mhm.
100, like the 100K distance at Canyons will be awesome for her. But I definitely double down on what you said about MK. I had messaged her coming into the weekend saying like, really wish we were seeing you out there as well, because I 100% agree. She's one of those like, she's a versatile athlete like you are. She puts herself in the Golden Trail World Series style races. She's been on a world's team and represented extremely well. Like, just kind of does it all too. And I think combining that marathon strength with the trail strength is just like right where you need to be for something like JFK.
Yeah, I going back to Danny, I actually texted her after the race and I was like, I was actually thinking about her out there being like, "Who, Danny would crush this." But to be fair, like honestly, almost every race I do, I'm like, "Oh, Danny would crush this."
Yes.
Also, shout out Danny and MK have a podcast called the Subhub Podcast where they talk about really anything less than an ultra marathon. So it's a really good, super informative, great listen.
Definitely. Yeah. Plus one to that. So, Rachel, you just ran an amazing JFK. Start by talking about like what you were anticipating JFK to be like, and how it either like met or exceeded, or things that like kind of how it laid out in your mind, and like how it actually kind of played out on paper then when it was all said and done.
Yeah, I mean, you and I went on a run, like, I think it was one of my last runs in Salt Lake City before we left, and I think you and I we talked about this on our little preamble, but just you and I are kind of the types of runners that tend to be a little more conservative and, like, really good executors and consistent. I mean, you're probably more consistent than I am, but, like, try to be just consistent athletes, and I feel like the challenge we gave to ourselves was to, like, put ourselves in there a little more, hurt a little earlier, and be more curious about what was possible, and I think we saw you do that at Run Rabbit Run, where you're, you know, running off the front, running hard, being more gutsy than usual, and that's kind of what I wanted to do here. I felt like I was just more conservative at my earlier on races, kinda coming off of having a sacral stress fracture, wanting to post some good results. And I feel like I, you know, posted some decent results earlier this year. And I was like, I felt like safe enough to blow up if
Mhm.
that were to happen. Like I didn't it wasn't like my one race of the year. So, um with that in mind, I kind of just was like, all right, I'm just going to try to put myself in the hurt a little bit sooner. And man, like we went out really hard. Like Mary and I were kind of like already racing, those
From
first two and a
2
half miles.
miles.
I was
Yes,
like, "This
yeah.
is way harder than I wanna be running right now, but I guess this is what
I
we're
know, and
doing."
I know you listened back a little bit to the live stream, but something I said 2.5 miles in when you guys get off of that uphill pavement road into right onto the AT, you guys had split like high 15s, high 16, somewhere in there, and the
Yeah, I think it
fastest
was
any
high
woman
16.
high 16s, the fastest anyone has ever done that was Jen Lichter last year at like 17:56. So you guys were already a minute faster than anybody had ever done it, and you were close to 2 minutes faster than course record pace 2.5 miles into the race, which
I honestly felt like I felt like as, like, hot of a burn as I felt running Mammoth Trail Fest. Like and that was like a 2-hour race, 2-hour,
I
20-minute or something. So, like
That's
yeah.
really cool. And I think that's something we can talk a little bit more about because I think that's a feeling a lot of runners are afraid of. I think it's a feeling I'm afraid of in a race is experiencing that like redlining feeling
Mhm.
earlier than you want to and being nervous about what's to come after that redlining feeling and how do you navigate that. So when you're running hard 2.5 miles into a 50-mile race, what were you telling yourself to keep you calm? Because I know you had a strategy for that first section. We can talk a little bit about that. But what are the things that you're telling yourself whenever that pace does feel hot, but you're kind of trying to trust it?
Yeah, honestly, my mind was, like, pretty blank for a lot of that section. Like, I don't think I've ever spent any time on the AT, the Appalachian Trail, um, but it's so cool. It's like the word that comes to mind is whimsical. It's just, like, it feels very playful and quirky and, like, it is very technical in spots. So I was just trying to stay super focused on the trail, try to keep it more like play. But there was a part of me that was like, "Gosh, this is dumb, but this is what I wanna do." Um, and I think part of that ended up like, one of the downstream effects of that is I feel like I wasn't able to eat as much early on because, like, obviously, when you're running hard, your body's going to prioritize shunting blood to your muscles and your heart and the things that are working and not going to send much blood to your gut. So I feel like that was like another kind of risk taken there
Mm,
aside from obviously making your muscles work harder. It's also not great for digestion.
mm. I think something, at least I was thinking of coming into JFK, was like you're a master of all trades. You can do the trail, you can do the towpath, you can do the road. You can hurt really bad for an hour. You can also hurt really bad for, 17 hours, like you did at Western States this year. So when you're on the AT, which is pretty technical for those of our listeners who have never been on there, how were you thinking about how that section played into the
Mm-hmm.
rest of the race? Because a lot of people, when they approach JFK, kind of break it into the three chunks. It's the AT, it's that technical, rooty, rocky section with a bunch of leaves over it. And then you got to kind of settle back into really consistent marathon on the towpath. And then you got to kind of convert that energy into rolling country roads. So, how were you approaching that effort and like your abilities on something that I would say is probably a strength of yours?
Yeah, yeah, I definitely felt like that was a section that I wanted to capitalize on, knowing that I felt pretty comfortable on trail and on somewhat technical terrain. Um, so with that in mind, it was either, okay, I'm gonna try to build a little gap between whoever's in second. Um, but also if I happen to be with someone there, my thought would be, okay, I'm comfortable on this terrain. So if someone's running with me, hopefully they're just working harder to keep
Hmm.
up. So either way, I had like a plan in my head of how I was going to think about it. Like If I was ahead, that was great. I'm building a little time. And if someone was with me, that's also great. I'm going to tell myself that they're having to work harder to get through this area than I am. Maybe they're like a little bit more stressed or tense or something.
Hmm. Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes me think a little bit of Tyler had a post coming into race day that said something along the lines of like, forget about splits, forget about numbers, let's just go and race.
Mhm.
And I really feel like that characterized your strategy going into JFK, like kind of throwing some of those things out the door and focusing on Rachel and Rachel's race.
Yep. Yeah, and I think, like, this is something we talked about with in our Western States recap, which, if you're listening to this and you like this, you should check that one out too, because Leah and I had an epic battle at Western States. But, you and I, like, we plan our races kinda off of splits, and we're checking in on that and calculating, like, "Okay, if I run these splits, I should run a course record, or I should place in the top 5 or the top 3," or whatever. But you never know what's gonna happen, and so I think especially nowadays with how much stronger the fields are getting, you can't hold yourself back by looking at splits and just trying to run certain splits. Like, you got to just do the best you can throughout each section. That doesn't mean go 100% effort, but like try to really um just capitalize and like be open to other possibilities. Like for me it was like, okay, I'm not just going to think about, Sarah Beal's course record. I'm going to think about like what's just possible for me on that day. Like I just that was really like what I wanted to do, is just, yeah, try really hard.
I think that definitely came across to anybody that was following the live stream at home and then or there in person is you were locked in from mile 2.5, probably mile 0. I didn't see you at the start, but Mike was up around mile 3 on the course taking photos. And he texted me and said, Rachel is silent. And I don't think Mike has probably ever experienced you being like that locked in and focused in a race where you were just so focused on giving all of your energy to the race. Like
Mhm.
often we do easy runs together and you're like commenting on the flowers, the birds, the bees, everything that's out there. It's fun and you're enjoying
Yeah.
it. And yeah, it's really playful. But this was a really cool environment where like you kind of had one goal and one goal only, and
Mhm.
you were just locked in on that. And it was really cool to see just how you do switch those gears.
Yeah. Yeah, it's more of like a it's like you turn inward, but it's like the deepest form of self-expression. I think racing, especially on something playful like the Appalachian Trail, it's like you're just like kind of pouring your soul out like through your body. Um yeah, it was hard and fun.
Thank you, Osprey, for sponsoring this episode of the show. Osprey packs are known for being durable, sustainable, and comfortable. I've been seeing a ton of Duro and Dyna trail running hydration packs on the trail, and I'm sure you have too. I also have to rave about my new favorite luggage, the Daylight Carry On Travel Pack 44 liter. It is the biggest carry on allowed on an airplane, and wow, have I been amazed at the amount of gear that this can carry. It's shocking. You can use it as a duffel or a backpack, which is super handy. And it has 2 stretch water bottle pockets, which I love. An open suitcase style with full zip opening. Honestly, it's the perfect travel bag for those on the go. The Daylight Carry On Travel Pack 44 liter. Try it out at osprey.com or check on the Pack Finder link to find the perfect pack for you.
So Weaverton is about 2 hours into the race. That's the first major crew point of JFK, and that marks kind of the first stage of the race being done. So you go from Appalachian Trail to preparing for the towpath and the C&O Canal Path. You do a full marathon. I think it's actually like 26.3 miles or so, 26.8, somewhere in there, on
Mhm.
a flat towpath. Doesn't undulate. It's pretty pancake flat. So what we see is a lot of runners changing their shoes from a trail shoe into a super shoe and then just like taking off out of there. Can you talk a little bit about that transition spot, because this is pretty energy filled. It's also
Mhm.
a bit chaotic. you want to be fast, you want to be quick, because truly in a race where you're hoping to go after the course record, you're hoping to keep second place off of you, who's like
Mhm.
not far behind, keep him off of you. How did that transition feel for you, and what was going through your head in those moments?
Yeah, like, watching it back, I'm just kicking myself because like, I couldn't get my vest off because my hands were a little cold, and Tyler was like, "You gotta get your headlamp off, you gotta get your vest off and put those things on the ground, like, you can't just stand there and do it." So, I'm like, those precious seconds I feel like I wasted. But actually descending down into Weaverton, I rolled my ankle really bad. The same
Oh
one that
no.
I rolled when I was chasing you downhill before Western States. And then like I rolled it because once you roll,
You
like
just keep
your
rolling it.
proprioception's kind of off. So then I rolled it again. So I'm kind of like hobbling down there, but then also acknowledging like, okay, I need to make myself look not weak as I come through here, knowing that like, that information is going to be passed down and I don't want people smelling blood in the water. So I feel like I kind of had to pull myself together through there. The transition, the shoe swap. So I did run in the um, Trail Pegasus 5, and then I switched into the Alpha Fly. And Nike actually made me a pair of I think it's called like Fly Ease technology, where it's cinch laces and then there's a little velcro kind of on the front, so you just slide your foot in, you pull the strap, and then you velcro it down. It's like
That's
very
awesome.
quick. And as I watched that transition compared to Mary Denholm, who ended up second and also got the course record, it was a lot faster because she actually had to tie her shoes, she sat down. I think I got maybe another 45, 50 seconds just not having to tie my shoes there, which that all adds up, especially mentally when you're like, you know, 1 minute versus 2 minutes or 2 minutes versus 3 minutes, like that. It feels significant. But then I also didn't realize that there was more trail after that transition point. So I'm running in these like kind of high stack road super shoes. I'm like, "Whoa, there's actually a lot of roots and rocks here." Like, is this all right? And I did forget to take my headlamp off, so I actually ran with and no one else was wearing a headlamp, like, for the whole race pretty much. So I also kind of felt like an idiot there, but I wore a headlamp for 27
That's
miles.
so funny you say that. Everything you just mentioned were things when I was either watching back on Instagram or like even commentating on the live stream. Those were like the three things that I noticed. The one thing I commented on the live stream was like the night before we had run that section of trail from Weaverton down to the towpath. And I was like, oh my God, the runners are going to have their super shoes on this section. Like, they're probably not going to know that. They're going to have to navigate that.
Yeah.
And then when I saw your aid station transition, I saw you come in with your pack, like still all like buckled together. And I think I'd commented, I was like, come on, Rachel, like undo that pack. Come on. Come on.
No, like, that's a total rookie mistake. You gotta be on it, but I don't know, I was not. Um,
And then Mike
I
told me about the headlamp. He was like looking at the photos. He's like, you see that picture right there? And I said, yeah, she looks great. He's like, yeah, she still got that headlamp on at Antietam at 27 miles.
I was, like, kicking myself and super embarrassed, and then Tyler's like, "Rachel, you won the race, like,
Yeah.
you're pretty cool," and I was like, "Ah, I feel like such a loser."
Yeah, I don't think there's any loser in you right now when
Mm.
you've got such an awesome course record out there. You mentioned Mary Denholm. She ended up second place on the day, running a minute under Sarah Beal's prior course record. She was within, a couple minutes of you all day long. You
Mhm.
mentioned that importance of aid station transitions, and I think that was something that I had noticed a bit during the race was you were a little quicker through aid stations. And a comment that she had made, I think out on course that got relayed to us in studio was, I'm in no man's land. And I think being
Mm.
in no man's land in a race like JFK is kind of tough. We
Yeah,
saw Eli and David Sinclair like being able to run
working
with each other
together.
and off each other. And I think some of those minutes can be crucial. And like, I mean,
Mhm.
it probably like it protected you at the end of the day in some ways. But yeah, talk about the feelings of having somebody not far behind you who's clicking off very similar towpath miles as you, just 90 seconds to 3 minutes behind you for that
Mhm.
entirety of the towpath.
Yeah. I was definitely thinking about that a lot, knowing that I couldn't slow down too much or I couldn't be weak because I knew that she was super strong. I mean, our marathon times are very close. Um, like I knew that she had the leg speed, and I also intentionally did not look at her training because I know that she's very high mileage, very hardworking. And it's not that I'm not hardworking, it's just that I'm not high mileage. And I knew that it wouldn't really do me much of a service to look at her like amazing Strava graphs. Um, but the other thing that I realized watching the live stream is, like you mentioned with Eli and David Sinclair, like David was drafting off of Eli for 37 miles, and there was a decent headwind that we were running into that was pretty suboptimal. Like I got passed by a couple men, or I would pass a couple men, and I would try to work with them for a little bit, but it just the paces never quite worked out. Like this guy Ryan Clifford came up by me and he was running like 6:20, 6:30 pace, and I was like, that's just a little too fast. And then I would roll up on another guy and he's running like 650, kind of like 650 high, and I'm like, it's a little too slow. So I think, like you said, it would have been, and this is what makes me think like, okay, there's definitely like more room for improvement here. If you could work with someone, especially if it's a windy day, like it was pretty windy out
Mhm.
there, just to kind of key off of each other and share the load a little bit. I think that would be better.
I totally agree. Something that I was looking at, and you could tell me if this is false or not, but I was curious about that transition from going from all trail miles to hitting the towpath and trying to figure out what is going to be my towpath pace. And I looked at your Strava, and it looked like for those first few miles on the towpath, you were like low 630s for your towpath,
Okay.
your first like 3 towpath miles.
Yeah.
How were you thinking in your head at that time? And you ended up kind of getting a little bit more comfortable. It seemed like in the 640s, like somewhere in the
Mhm.
640s range for those. How were you feeling your pace in those early miles to try to figure out where will I live for the next marathon?
Yeah. I mean, I knew that the it was basically a 3-hour marathon was like I knew that was course record pace, so I kinda knew I wanted to be around, I think that's like 650s.
Yeah, I
Does
think
that sound right?
652 or so. Yeah.
Okay. So I knew I didn't wanna be faster than like 6:30, but I also knew that I didn't really wanna be slower than 6:50. But I also didn't wanna look at my watch too obsessively, because looking at your watch every mile for 26 miles is like, you gotta just let your body do what it wants to do. So I was thinking more about like, okay, what feels sustainable to me right now? Um, Trying to like envision a pace that I felt like I could keep for 3 hours, but not necessarily like looking at my watch trying to hit an exact time or split for every single mile.
I will add for our listeners that you ran 26.3 miles and 2:58:12, which is mind blowing because this was, already 15 and a half miles, 2 hours into the race, and you threw down a sub 3 hour marathon. The only woman to ever do that during JFK, which is
Oh,
very
I
cool.
didn't know that. Good
Yeah.
stat,
So
Leah.
you should go throw down a nice little road marathon soon and see what you can pull out there.
Oh, it's time for a break.
Yeah, you deserve it. Uh, so I don't think you showed absolutely any signs of weakness all day long, especially like while you're on the towpath. You looked flawless all day long. Talk about, you know, getting off the towpath or maybe mid towpath, seeing your crew, exchanges you had with them, kind
Mhm.
of how you were feeling as those miles dragged on a little bit.
Yeah, that's a perfect way of putting it. It really did feel like it dragged on. Like, it was a beautiful path and there were a lot of folks out on course. So that was great, but it kind of it made me think of my very first road marathon I ran at Grandma's Marathon in Duluth, Minnesota, and folks were asking me about the race, like, "Oh, how'd your marathon go?" And it's like I ran on a country road for 2 hours and 40 minutes, and like ran past mailboxes and there was a lake there, but it wasn't like it's not like in a trail race where you're like, "Oh, and then there was this big climb and this big descent and there was mud and the weather changed and then it was night." Like there was nothing, like it was just pretty monotonous. And it was definitely a boost to see, to get to see Tyler and Lou. My son, my 2-year-old, was out with my husband, and it was pretty cool seeing my husband would like hand him off to a stranger just while he crewed me. And so it was great to see, like, oh, there's Lou in some woman's arms that I don't know. Like that honestly just warms my heart, like how awesome the running community is. Um, yeah.
I love to hear you say that because uh, I was in the booth all day talking about the race. Mike got to be out on course getting photos, and I asked him how his day was and how Tyler and Lou kind of handled the day crewing you. And he's like, it was awesome. It was this like crowdsourced effort. He's like,
Mhm.
somebody was always holding Lou or helping with Lou. He's like Tyler had one guy with his timer out on his phone at one point,
Are
timing
you
the
serious?
yeah, timing the separation between like you and second place. And he's like, it was awesome because it's like that is what ultra running is. It's
Mhm.
kind of leaning on your friend that you just met next to you to help you get through a little spot.
Yeah.
And it was really cool to see you and Tyler and Lou have this family affair of an event where you just had a phenomenal race. You guys came from Salt Lake City, stopped over in Minnesota, came to the East Coast. You've never run these trails before. And like we see people at JFK have success on their second go around, their third go around. And you were experiencing this for the first time. And so was Tyler and Lou. And I think to see somebody have success with the whole family is really cool. And it also speaks to like the community out there as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely makes it more meaningful. I originally was proposing to Tyler that we should leave Lou with my parents in Minnesota and then go pick him up on the way home. And Tyler was like, "No, it's so much more fun when he's there." Like, and Tyler knew it would be a pretty easy crew, like pack swaps pretty much. So, Tyler was like, "Oh, we should bring him." And I'm really glad we did because it's like, yeah, it's super special to share those moments. Speaking of the crowdsource thing, it makes me think of crewing Tyler at the Hong Kong 100K this February. There was this aid station where there were all these monkeys like stealing people's stuff. And when you crew an ultra, you lay everything out. You have bananas. Monkeys love bananas. You have gels, you have Coke. Monkeys love Coke. Like, but at this aid station, you couldn't lay anything out because the monkeys would run up and grab stuff. Like I was with Fu Xiao, and Fu Xiao's partner, this monkey crawled up his leg, ripped the bottom of a plastic bag, and like all the contents fell out. So I made friends with, actually, Nuria Picas was there, this Spanish trail running legend. And she was like, all right, she's holding the bottles, another woman's holding the Coke. Like it was like a 5-person ordeal. Like we were all watching each other's backs because these monkeys were, and the funniest part is it was, the aid station was staffed by these Boy Scouts.
Oh my God.
So these little boys are being chased by monkeys, like these little boys eating hot dogs at the aid station. Like you can't make this up. I know this has nothing to do with JFK, but
It has everything to
yeah,
do with JFK at
it's
the same time.
so funny.
Oh,
So
that's
funny.
amazing. We need to go there now.
Highly recommend. Highly recommend. Everyone should go to Hong Kong. It's the best.
Well, let's see here.
Back on
Yeah,
track.
one question I did have for you though was, did you have any moments all day long where you were afraid?
Yeah, I feel like I was afraid pretty early on, like just with how hard I was running and how I think I did kind of eat what I wanted to eat probably for the first third or half of the race. But then when I was on the towpath, I was drinking like a high carb drink and my nipple like flew out of
Oh
the
no, I hate when that
bottle.
happens.
And so my precious like carbs were kind of spraying everywhere. So I had to like put my finger over over
Mhm.
the whole. And then I was like, I gotta just drink this all right now because like
I'm gonna
I'm
lose it
not
otherwise.
I'm gonna lose it and like I'm not really feeling the gels. So honestly, like all you high carb aficionados out there, like I did not do that at all. And I'm kind of glad I didn't because I heard like I know Mary had GI problems. I know Eli had GI problems. I think like that yeah, like big dogs got to eat, right? Like that's what my brother always told me. But and I stand by that, but not if you're like obsessively trying to consume 120 grams of carbs per hour and then throwing up or pooping your pants like I was
Mhm.
doing at Black Canyon this year.
Yeah. Mm,
Um, so I think like just a little just a little like devil's advocate with the whole high carb thing. Like
yeah.
there is such a thing as fat metabolism.
Mhm.
Um, I think
Especially as
that we
women
don't
too. I think you and I
Yes.
think talk a lot about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious, like, with the Lululemon Further project too, if there's, like, some real tangible data that came out of that, like, actually um, quantifying that. But I think, like, things swing one way or the other. Like, recently, we were really obsessed with the keto diet and, like, people were all about that and now we've swung the other way and like I want to keep my fat metabolism mechanism, so maybe that's my excuse for not like force feeding myself a ton of food. But I guess getting back to your question, I was a little bit nervous about like some things like that, kind of losing some of my liquid calories, and then also towards the end I wasn't really taking in much gel and I felt like my legs were kind of on the verge of cramping, like at least halfway through. So I was kind of playing this game of like, okay, I want to keep pressing and running hard, but I also don't want to like pummel myself into the ground and like go into a full body cramp because I saw that video of Zach Miller at JFK where he's like, I think he's in the gym and he's just like writhing on the floor, like his legs are cramping up.
Yes. Yeah.
Have you seen
You,
that?
yes, and you don't want that.
No. I think it's in his movie. It's called like
Yeah.
what's his movie called?
I think there's another one from that same race where it's him on his stomach and his entire hamstring is just like blown out and like bruised down the entire back.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
Ugh.
I wasn't trying to do that.
To Zach Miller. Oh
But I
gosh.
wanted that. I wanted to feel afraid and like, gosh, can I do this? But that's like exactly what I wanted. I didn't want to be like I didn't want to run 42 miles feeling perfect and then just like crank the last 8 miles on the rolling road like feeling strong. Like I wanted to finish on empty, and maybe that didn't mean executing the perfect race with the perfect splits with drafting and
Yeah.
like measuring my effort perfectly. I just like really wanted to feel like I put forth a really really hard effort, and I think I did that.
Yeah, that's something I wanted to ask you too. Like, I look at your race and I look at your race in the thirds that I was talking about, and you ran historic splits. You ran the fastest split ever on the first third, fastest splits ever on the second third, second fastest split on that last third to the finish, then with Mary running just a minute faster than you from Dam 4 to the finish. You did not, on paper, look like you had any lows. Do you feel like you had any lows aside from the ones that you just mentioned, or did this feel like a pretty like even keeled, hard day start to finish?
It felt pretty even keel, hard
Mm.
day, start to finish. I think rolling my ankle twice was, like, a little bit jarring, and then the nipple incident, um, but it did yeah, it felt like just a very steady grind, and I think, like, this brings me back to this training block where, like, it was far from perfect. I was far from being like, "Ooh, I got 8 hours of sleep and I ate the right things at the right intervals and all this stuff." Like, I went into a lot of key sessions feeling like kinda nauseous from being up all night working or like just, you know, not feeling good, and I think that really allowed me to like any little thing that came up during the race, I was like, "Oh, this is fine." Like I've been more uncomfortable in this training block than I am right now. So, this is totally fine. So,
Definitely.
I think that was
Like,
actually pretty cool. Yeah.
yeah, like I was even thinking back to a comment that you made in a workout recently when we said, you want to run another lap around Liberty Park for our cool down. And you were coming off an overnight. You had just done a workout. You were tired and you're like, no, I'd rather just like go home and like get what sleep and rest and loo time that I can, rather
Mhm.
than just like trying to get that extra mile that maybe your training had prescribed, but you were kind of weighing this balance of what's worth it and what's not in this moment. And it
Mhm.
seems like your whole training block was like that. It was kind of weighing this balance of, okay, the importance of needing to get in these key workouts, but also recognizing where your body was at and your mind was at in certain moments in time and respecting that.
Yeah. And it's different day to day. It's like that's what I needed that day, and now that I'm a little bit older and a little bit wiser, I feel like I have the confidence to say, yeah, I feel good about not doing this last rep or not doing an extra cool down or not perfectly hitting my mileage, knowing that it's going to be better for the big picture for me to do something else. So that's something I've been trying to work on, and yeah, it's been good.
Do you have any other takeaways along those same lines for people out there who are balancing a lot, especially other women who are moms, who are working full time, perhaps people who are also in their residency? Uh, Advice or tips or just outlooks that you have found to be useful for yourself?
I think like we can do a lot more than we think we can with a little. Like we can make a lot out of a little. And my point with that is like, to be your best self or to like um to do something that you're proud of, you don't have to like run 100 miles a week and like quit your job. I'm not saying quitting your job is a bad thing. I think that's also cool. But you can actually get in pretty good training. And I think like for you and I specifically, I mean, I've seen you do it your entire running career. Like I think having a job and having a family, those things actually can make you a better athlete because they make you more grounded. If you have a bad workout, it's not it's not your everything. If you have a bad race, it's not your everything. You still have your career that you can put energy into. Your 2-year-old kid doesn't care if you hit your splits in your workout or won your race. Like I
He
really
just
think
wants
like
he just wants that monster truck back out of the leaves.
yeah. Yeah, that was like the real bummer with the day. Lewis got some mini monster trucks from my grandma and uncle, and he lost Thor in a big pile of leaves. So yeah. Yeah, that was a bummer. Um, but truly, like in all seriousness, I think that like being a resident, being a mom have like elevated my running because it's like, yeah, I'm I'm kind of forced to do the best that I can with what I have. And then also when it comes to race day, it's not like, oh my gosh, it's all make or break. Everything's been perfect. I have to have a perfect day. Like, we as moms and as working professionals know how to get stuff done when conditions are not perfect. And you can draw on that on race day or on whatever you're trying to do.
Ugh, I love that so much. What a nice little takeaway. Uh, yeah, Rach, I mean, I'll sing your praises every day of my life. You just ran 5:57 and change, I think 32, 5:57:32 at JFK. First woman to ever go under 6 hours. You did it while conquering an obscene work schedule that we don't even need to hash out on the podcast, but I saw it from the sidelines and like I'm amazed. I'm in awe of you. And I think we have so many listeners who are just constantly inspired by you and love to hear your story and love to hear how you get things done and get things done really freaking well.
Thanks, Leah. There's a lot of amazing women in our orbit, and I feel like like I'm hearing lots of nice things right now, but I've got a lot of really, really awesome friends and training partners in our crew here. So yeah, feel super lucky.
Anything you want to leave our audience with before we sign off?
Just go for it. Like I think, you know, it's easy to think like, oh, well, I can't train for this race because I have XYZ, or I can't do this because, you know, like we make excuses for ourselves. But I think it's fun to, as they say on the SWAT podcast, F around and find out. I really, really like that quote. Just like just see what you can do.
Oh, well, thank you so much for recapping your race with us, Rachel. You are an incredible ambassador for the sport, an ambassador for all the brands that you represent: Nike, Trail, Osprey. Shout out Osprey. You were wearing a pack from start to finish out there, and looks like it did the trick for you. And they're a sponsor of the pod and good friend of all of ours. So,
Yeah.
yeah, you are a great representation of all things that are good in trail running, and just a joy to have you as a co-host on the pod, and then to see you just have all the successes that you do.
Thanks, Leah. Love you.
Love you. Until next time.
Yeah, keep tuning in. We're gonna have some fun recap episodes in the pipeline from the year, and kind of looking forward to next year. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere else, Leah? YouTube. If you
YouTube.
like to see our faces, yeah, check out our YouTube. Subscribe, smash that like button, slip into our DMs either on the Trail Network Pod on Instagram or just our individual DMs. We love to hear from you, hear what you think. If you have ideas of things you want us to talk about, we are all ears. We're having fun with this. So thanks for listening.
Love you guys.